about that in just a minute, okay? All right, let's take a look at the agenda that we have. First one is, I love this. Eric posted this. I haven't seen Eric announce himself this morning, but Eric posted this, and I thought it was really good. The courage of sharing imperfect things is a muscle that you have to develop, and it's never easy. I'm always asking you to share the things that you've done in the group. That way other people can take a look at it and see. And Elle has done that a lot. We're going to talk about her in particular today because of the amount of stuff that she's done and the support that she's gotten from other people. It's never easy to do this. This is hard. When I put something out there and say, what do you think? It's kind of scary, but it's a muscle that you have to develop, and it makes you better. And Eric's a great example of that. I love this illustration, though. I really do. I think this is an amazing illustration, and it clearly illustrates the message that he is trying to convey here. Notice that the font is one of those imperfect style fonts, and everything else is kind of a blur. And I really like the way that communicates. It communicates the message by the visual. It enhances the message that's being communicated. Okay. The next thing is, Elle had made this really, really good post, but I want you to see this last part here. So thank you guys for being the app support that supports the user's dreams. And I think that that's a reality. Much of what we try to do here is to help you to fulfill whatever size role that you have, wherever and whatever community that you're plugged into, whether it's an online community or it's a local community. Our desire is to help you and support you to making that dream become a reality. There's Eric. Eric, we just talked about you. So yeah, really like this little visual that you did here, Eric. I really do. So thank you for that. Appreciate it. We're talking about Elle, and then this was really good. I was in a hospital bed when I saw this post come up, and I started to say something, and I thought, I'm not going to do this. Other people in the group can help Elle, and they will do an amazing job. And that was on an earlier post that she'd made, and then she came back with this little thank you. Remember this, and I say this all the time, close the loop. When somebody gives you help, tell them how it turned out. When somebody gives you encouragement, tell them how that turned out. Make sure that you treat this just exactly like you would if somebody was in the room. That makes for a better experience for everybody that's involved. I work with another community where really we want to become a community, and it's very important that we understand and treat each other in the community as though they were our neighbors and our friends. All right, Pete did this. I thought this was very creative. Creative use of putting the Uzine logo in the top, putting the time that's there, the curve text following the curve in the cup. All this is an amazing visual. First of all, I want to thank you, Pete, for saying that. But it is a great visual, and I really love the little steam that he has coming out of the top of the cup. I thought that was just really fantastic. So did y'all see that? That was a really cool post that was made on the first Friday that I missed. I just thought this was a very creative use of the tools that we had. Then Gene did this, and I want to talk about this for just a little bit. He took a visual that he found somewhere else, and I thought that was pretty cool. And then wrapped around it the information about the time change. And so I wanted to, because the question was asked earlier, how do you import this kind of an image into Uzine so that you can use it? We'll talk about that. But oftentimes importing an image that you find somewhere else or something that people are familiar with can be helpful. Make sure that you don't violate any copyright issues when you do that. And we've talked about that at length before. But this is a really interesting usage of the of a way to create an image that can be very, very helpful to people. And so thank you, Gene, for that illustration. Now, I want to show you something where we took an image like this, put it in a post, and it went viral. I'm going to show you the definition of a viral post. How many of you have actually ever seen an image go viral or something that you've created actually go viral? Yeah, I'm sure it had a lot of shares. That was pretty cool. Hello, Clee. Good to have you on today. How many of you have actually had a post that has gone viral? I want to show you my definition of that, because this one happened almost by accident. But I want to show you the components of this. We have a little group in Butte, Montana called Experience Butte. Now, I don't live there anymore. I used to, but I have a gal who was making images for me, and she was on her way into the office one day, and she had just seen this image come up in the news site, and as she's driving, she noticed that school buses were running, the grocery stores were open. There was the people at the fire department were actually running a barbecue outside. And look at these temperatures: 46 degrees below zero, 36 degrees below zero. It was 32 degrees below zero there when that happened. Now, the coldest I ever saw there was 37 degrees below zero. But do you see that? This is just a simple visual, a very simple. There's nothing complicated about this. But look at the number of people who were reached and the number of times that there was an engagement on this. 160,027 engagements on that single post. It was shared, or it was seen. Yeah, and that's exactly what it did. This is the secret to virility. It was something very simple, but it communicated something special. Now, this having reached 1,054,000 people, that's 300,000 more people than live in the state of Montana. That's, to me, the definition of virility. That's how something goes viral. When you reach more people, a post about the state reaches more people than live in the state, then something magical happened. But again, this was exactly what Gene did here. All right. This was extremely helpful to people, just a reminder about what's going on. And that was helpful. This was just a pat on the back. And this was from the things taken as my friend made her trip to work that day. So there's some interesting things that happen when you have an image that goes viral. But I just wanted to share that with you today. That's coming up. It'll be 2 years in January. When this happened, our likes went up 4,000. We got 4,000 new page likes as a result of this single image right here. Okay. The next one is this was actually what led Elle to make this comment right here, was the support that she got for this. And again, did a great job of putting this together. I really like some things that are here. I like the fact that she took this and put it at an angle. That's more captivating than just having a straight across the bottom. Just a really, really cool example of a great image. All right. The next one is we talk about templateology a lot. It's kind of a funny term. And so as a result, that's ended up with, Ericologists and all kinds of other things that have come from that. But I want to remind you, sometimes when you're stumped and sometimes when you're stuck and you're not sure what to do, just go back and take a look at some of this. Is a great piece of information right here. This is a great piece of information on steps to creating an awesome infographic, but it's a great way to introduce any kind of a graphic. And so I highly encourage you to go back and see if there's anything here that you can grab and use. Take advantage of everything that you have available to you. And then we're going to take some templates apart and we're going to look at them. I want to talk about this curve text right here. This is actually the curve text tool to make the mouth on this snowman looking image right here. So we'll play with this just a little bit. I'll talk about that a little bit. I want to talk about some other templates and how you can utilize those and ideas that you can get from that, and places that, as we get ready to go into the holidays, we need to be a little inspired as to things that we might be able to do, and a good, careful look at the tools that are available to us to make that work. Okay, does that sound good? I'm going to ask you for input occasionally so that I can wet my pipes. All right. It gives me an opportunity to have a little break. So I want to show you, we can get kind of creative with the curves here. I decided to change the kind of, I liked this. Okay, this works well for a snowman, but I decided, let's see if we can create our own little graphic. We can create our own little graphic here. But I was playing with different kinds of things to use for this curved mouth right here, and things that we could do with that. And so we'll play with the curves just a little bit because these are symbols from the keyboard and not letters. And so don't forget that you do have the ability to be able to do that and create a really nice looking image that goes here. We play with that just a little bit. So that's it. I did have one question as we got started, and I will address that one in just a little bit. And that was, how do you insert images? If anybody else has any other questions, I'll do my best to try to gain those. It feels to me like we're going to have probably 30 minutes from this point on. And so I'll do my best to try to maximize that time for you so that we can do the best job that we have with the things that we have available to us. All right, allow me to change my screen, and we'll open the canvas and we'll begin to address those things, okay? Give me just a moment while I stop sharing that screen. Takes a moment for my my platform to catch up with me. So there we go. All right. Give me just a second here. Y'all can still hear me, right? All right, now you should see a new screen with that goofy looking smiley face that I had earlier. Hopefully that's what you're seeing. All right, good. Everybody says that they are. Okay. All right, this is, if you can see up here in the corner, what that is, I'm going to tell you how I put this together, and we'll add a couple of things to this and we'll play with it just a little bit. Let me get the chat screen up here so I can see it. Can somebody help Mike with the questions that he's asking? He's asking about the sessions being recorded. Most frequently asked question, period. All right, what we're going to do here, I'm just going to add to this just a little bit. We're going to make this look a little bit more interesting. And so what we're going to do, and again, I was inspired to do this from the templates that I saw, so I can create this little, and see if that makes things just a little bit different. That's kind of what I want right there. I'll put that right there and then duplicate that. And I'm doing this so that you can see all of these tools kind of in action here. And that is, we can use that duplicate tool to do some cool stuff. This right here, I can actually duplicate this. And the duplication of that makes a rather interesting piece like that. So this is actually, I took the tilde mark, which is right above your tab key, and I used that to create that string of pieces together there. So when you change this, and you can see what happens when you do that. Let me move that out of the way down here so you can see that. But what you have to do is play with your spacing a little bit. I slid those together because I thought they looked cool together. And then you can All right, did anybody lose the picture? Let me check here. Hold on a second. Yep. Looks like the screen share stopped. All right, that's an internet connection. All right, let me refresh. Don't anybody go anywhere. Let me refresh and see if I can get this to restore. Okay. I'm going to refresh and I will be right back. Would you please? Okay, good. All right, if you can hear me, let's see if we can restore the screen now and make this work. All right, do you see the window now? Do you see the smiley face in the window? Okay, good. All right, then let's go back here. I need to do a couple of housekeeping things now that I've had to refresh. All right. All right, good. I'm sorry about that. Sometimes the connection just gets disrupted. So just keep that in mind. Sometimes we have to play the game a little bit in order to make it work. All right. So this is another image. This is simply, I took this triangle right here, changed the direction of it, and then did that to it. Okay. So that we can create this image that's here. Get that fairly close. We can duplicate that now. That's exactly what we have. Now, watch what you can do here. I can actually take this image and I'll add that on top of it. And can you see how that gave a little depth to that nose? I can do that with a little bit of depth there. All right. Thank you, Clea. I appreciate you doing that. All right. So think about how can I use the curved text in ways other than just text? That's my point this morning. How do you, how do you use that curved text to accomplish other things besides just text? Can I do other interesting things with it? And again, I'm kind of exaggerating things here, so it's easier for you to see. But how many of you have ever used the curved text for something other than just text? Has anybody done that? Clea has had some very imaginative ways to do that. I've seen more really cool stuff that has been accomplished by Clea than other things, okay? So, yeah, you're not going to have a good experience, Jesse, with the iPhone app. I'm sorry. Angelito's asking a question here. I'm not sure what the question is. I can't do a screenshot during the middle of a webinar. That's just impossible for me to do. I can't disrupt the webinar to go look at a screenshot. If you don't mind putting that screenshot in the group so that I can see that, because I really don't have any idea what you're talking about, my local Usign. Unless you're talking about the desktop version. If you're talking about the desktop version, then that's a different question. Okay, you're talking about the desktop version. The way you do the desktop version is you simply open up the app and then grab the image that you want to put in it and drag it over and drop it on top of the canvas, and it will open right up. Okay, if that doesn't work, then there's an issue that's probably not related to the app. It's probably related to something that's being blocked by your computer. Okay, all right. Using your curve tool to accomplish other things. That was my point I really wanted to make this morning was, can I use the curve tool to accomplish other things besides just, which this is kind of creative. You know, you're going to have to come up with some interesting things for the holidays. Okay, Gemma's asking a question here, which I will address right now. If I want to save something as a group, like if I really like this and this knows that I've saved here, all right, if I like that, then what I want to do is make this so that it's easy for me to get a hold of. I start there, hold down my shift key, and then I click on the next image, which is the nose piece on top of that. Now I've had to slightly skew that in order for me to be able to capture it. And then I can capture this right here. And when that happens, up here, you'll see this group button. Click on the group button and you can click the save icon. This is the universal save icon. Go back over here to graphics, go to groups. And there's that image that I just saved. Okay. But that's how I save it and get it over here. Yeah, you have to remember to do the group save thing. That's a that's a pretty common issue. People forget to do to save it as a group, and then you've got it over here so that you can do other things with it. You can, these are the things that we did from the last time where we saved the flower image, and then we brought it back in and overlaid it over the top of the other image. Okay, so there's ways to save that. Now I got this little image right here I got from a template, and so we're going to talk about the templates next. All right, let's go back out here and we'll go to templates. Now if you just type in holidays or holiday, if I can type holiday, you're going to get excuse me, you're going to get some options here under your templates. Some of these are going to be helpful to you. Some of them will not. This is my favorite right here, so we're going to play with this one. All right, we'll open this one up just because I like the color in this. And again, don't hesitate to grab a template and save something out of it. Just like Gemma asked the question about how do I save as a group. You can save some things from a template and use them over and over and over again. This is a good example of this. This is a good example of being able to stack and layer these individual SVG files on top of each other. But let's take a look at this one right here because there's some really interesting things in this that I want you to see. I think we can have a little fun with this. Okay, this image actually comes from our vector image files over here. There's some other things I find really interesting in here. These snowflakes are kind of cool. I think that can be helpful as well. I really like this. Y'all know how I feel about taking your text and putting on a slat tilt. This is a slat tilt here that I really, really like in this particular image. But notice the other things that are here. We have on either side of the word happy, we have this dot, which is good. We have an image here. We have an image here. We have an image here. These are all full-size images, okay? So this right here, this SVG file has multiple colors in it. Now, I thought this was a very creative use of using a darker red in the background to make it look like it was at a distance. Does that make sense to everybody? We'll make sure that we have some depth of field to this. Gives that a much greater look there. Now, over here, you'll find some other really interesting things. For example, if I want to take and add a reindeer, to this, make it kind of subtle. What I would do in this case, and this is purely a personal opinion, I would take the color of that and I would match it to this color right here. Then I would take that and reduce the opacity of it. All right. And we can add that in. Now, I think that these look to me, they look too symmetrical. These are too perfect, right? Does that make sense? Do you understand what I mean when I say they're too perfect? One of the hardest things that we'll ever do is learn to think in a random fashion. But I think this is a good example of when we need to think in a random fashion. So let's take a look over here. And that's what this is, okay? We've kind of got this image right here. Can you see that? That's what that is. All right. So this is pretty symmetrical. When you do this, you'll notice that this is at exactly the same angle. Is that making sense to everybody? Do you see where I got that from and why I'm talking about this? All right. Interestingly enough, what they did here was they took another color, red. This is a darker red. They took a little bit lighter, a little brighter red, and made that fade in like that. Now, what I would do, because to me, it looks too identical. So I'm going to come over here and I'm going to grab a couple of these. All right. I'm going to do this. And then I'm going to duplicate that about 3 times. I'll put this down here. Put one of these over here. Put this up here. Okay. So now we've done that. Now that's one way to accomplish that. And what I might want to do is make that look like that. And that kind of changes that. But do you see the depth that adds now by taking that image? Now, also, again, that looks too perfect. So you want to kind of skew that just a little bit, right? Now, this one over here, what I want to do with it is I want to reduce the opacity even more. And I'm going to change the angle on it like this. And then you start to change the look of the image, right? We go from a 2-dimensional flat image to being able to add some depth to it by simply making those tiny changes to the image that's there, right? Make that a little brighter so it's a little bit more in the foreground. But do you see what we're doing? Excuse me. I apologize for not muting my mic during that, but I'll end up talking and forgetting to unmute the mic. And you might want to change the sizes of these a little bit when you do that as well. Do you see how just adding these right here and changing the opacity of them a little bit changed the depth perspective? Again, we can take a template, just simply take it apart and start to look for those kinds of things. Let's eliminate this one down here. Let's just eliminate that and we'll add something else to it. Okay. We can do this. I probably don't want that to be black. I probably want it to be some lighter variation of white like that. All right. Now, there's a couple of things that make this image work. The couple of things that make it work. Exactly, David. I appreciate that. You can flip those images. These are totally symmetrical images, so flipping them doesn't do anything other than just skewing them. It's kind of what you do. But you can flip the images. You can invert them. There's lots of things that you can do with that. But I have this right here. And then we can do exactly what was just said, and that is you can add a shadow. So there's multiple things that you can do here. I take that shadow, and this time I'm going to make the shadow white, and I'm going to move the distance out a little bit, and you can see that makes that stand out just a little bit. You can do exactly the same thing with this tree, which can be helpful as well. If I do that, leave that a dark color, increase the opacity of that. It also adds a depth of perspective. Okay, that's a good question, Jeffrey. Let's see if we can do that. Okay, so let's just say that I want to take, and I'm just going to do this here. Again, this was a group. Okay, these are two different fonts, but they were saved as a group when in the template. So I'm going to click on this one, and I'm going to do this. I'm going to change these two images, these two letters right here, and I'm going to change them to that green color that we had before. All right, if I can find that green color, it's just going to be easier to do this. Does that make sense? Do you understand what I did there, Jeffrey? So you can just highlight the letter, and then you can change it inside of the, and then change it with your color picker over here. All right. All right. Anything else that we could do to this image? Obviously, changing the color of the shadow going to make a huge difference in the way this looks. But simply adding these other elements here enhanced the look of the template drastically. That's a good question. Actually, the question about perspective was given the other day, and so I want to address the perspective issue. Give me just a second here. I want to address this perspective issue because it makes a difference in the shadows. All right. In this case, we'll take a look here and I'll show you what I'm talking about. In this case, that shadow is going down and to the right. When I click over here, this shadow is going down and to the right. So I want to make sure so that my perspective looks right. I want to make sure that my shadow is going in the same direction unless I'm changing perspective with the shadow. And that's a little tricky. So let's talk about how to do that now. Okay. All right. Does everybody understand what we've done to modify this template so that it changes the look of it and utilizing the shadows, utilizing the colors. I kept the colors basic. This is white, green, and red. And all we did was change the opacity of those colors and made them make the image look more, I started to say more better. Obviously, I've been out of the loop for a little while. Makes them look, gives them more depth and give them more perspective. You're exactly right, David. When you do what I just did right here, I've taken what everybody else has as a template, and I've now made it something that is uniquely Eric. Okay. All right. Let's talk about perspective for a moment, because I think that's going to be beneficial to us. I'm going to start with just a blank screen. I'm going to show you a little trick that I used to do all the time. I actually did this for a long time because it was helpful to me on understanding perspective. Yep, that's why we call it templatology. It's a good place to begin. So let me show you a little trick that I have used a lot. And I think this is very helpful. It was very helpful to me in the beginning of learning this matter of shadows and perspective. So, and you're going to think this is kind of funky, but this is what I do. All right. I take an arrow and I show which direction the light's coming from. So if the light's coming from here, I'll simply put the shadow here, or I put the arrow there, and then I go up and I get whatever it is that I want to work on. Let's take for this case, we'll go back to the holiday thing and we'll do that for a minute. All right. So, and by the way, do this frequently. Open up each one of these vector images and scroll through them, because sometimes things get added to those, and the things that get added can be helpful to you. Have you, the question is, I don't know who asked that question about podcasts. Have you looked to see what podcast templates are available now? Because there are some cool stuff, okay? All right, so now I have a perspective. My light is coming from here. So when I click on this, which direction does my shadow need to go? All right. And I'm going to exaggerate this so it's easier for you to see. I'm going to make that very dark and put some distance to it. Now, this obviously doesn't work, right? Because the shadow is going the wrong direction for the direction from the light. Does that make sense? That's how I learned to think in terms of perspective. Which direction is the light coming from? And I would just use an arrow to help me to remember my light's coming from that direction. So when I do this, I want to match the direction of that light, right? That helps me a lot with making sure I've got my shadows going the right direction, and using the tools that are available to make sure that this works for me. Now, there's a couple of really cool things that we can do with this. Let's say that in this particular case, what I want now is and this is very, very hard to illustrate, but I'm going to do this. I want the light to be coming straight down. All right. So that this looks like it's standing up from the page. Watch this. You can do this from a perspective standpoint. I'm going to duplicate this. And now I'm going to play with the shadow, and I'm going to move the shadow this way. So I now have my light coming down from the top and showing the shadow in that way. Now I've got to adjust these two so that they're perfectly on top of each other. But do you see what we've done? That's where this little arrow can be extremely helpful to you. Just reminds me which direction is the light coming from. This is coming, in this case, what this is doing is it's basically coming from a 45-degree angle above the image and shining straight down on it from a 45-degree angle. And it makes that kind of shadow. Because if it were shining straight down, and we never look at anything in a two-dimensional way, we look at everything in a three-dimensional way. So I would not be looking straight down at the image. I would instead be looking at it at an angle. We talked about that at length the last time. But do you understand how valuable this little trick right here can be? Does that make sense to everybody? It's kind of like me using the smiley face to create my curved text. I need you all to respond. You make me think that the computer is locked up again, or the webinar is locked up. And so what you're doing is you're simply helping you to visualize the direction the light's coming from. And it's really important to visualize that. So for me, it was easy to do this. It was really easy to take this and go, okay, what I want to do is I want it to come from this direction. All right, the thing that I'm going to do if I want it to come from this direction is I simply want to change the direction of my shadows. All right, so I'm going to change my direction of my shadow here. And I'm going to rotate that a little bit so that I can illustrate like that. Okay, this is coming from a 45-degree angle up, and it's shining in that direction. And here I am making these hand motions. I apologize for that. I'm trying to illustrate for you that this light is not shining straight across. It's not flat. The hardest thing for us to do when we're working on a flat canvas is to think in dimensions other than flat. Shadows allow you to be able to create in different dimensions than flat. Does that make sense to everybody? Yeah, this is a two-dimensional platform, and to think in 3 dimensions is really important. And I just added that third dimension with this shadow. But this little trick right here helps remind me of where that shadow is coming from and which direction it should be going. And I can change the height. Let's do this. I'll show you. I can click on this and I can change the height of that light by doing this. All right. What I'm doing is I'm changing the angle of the light without changing the direction, by simply changing the distance. So everybody following with me? Now I've taken a really simple, seriously, a really simple visual to do this with, so it's easy for you to see. But when you start to add other things, other elements to this, for example, if we change the background here and we go over here to the background and I put this kind of a background behind it, now it makes sense, right? Or if we change this to a texture, actually I have an image over here I love to use. So let me see if I can find it right here. Now, do you see how that makes that heart jump up off of the beach? Let me see if I can find one and I'll show you this. Because I think this is something that is important for you to know. This is a really, seriously, an important issue. It's an important part of your design. Let me find one here. I think I have a t-shirt design saved from previous t-shirt conversations right there. All right, let's take this t-shirt. If I put the t-shirt there, it gets lost on the beach, right? It kind of gets lost on the beach. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go over here and I'm going to start to add some shadow to it. I'm going to add some distance to it because that'll help. And I'm going to increase the opacity because that'll make it better. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to duplicate it. Right there. And now I'm going to change the direction of the shadow to this way. Now I'm starting to make that stand up off the beach, right? Put this here like this. And now take the shadow and move it that way, right? So now I've made that t-shirt pop up off of the beach rather than blend into it. We did this about a year ago, and I met an amazing artist. And you all have heard me talking about my friend, the artist who did the mosaic at the church down here, which is the second largest mosaic in the world at the time that it was created. And so we sat and talked about shadows one day and how important shadowing is and what it can do and the goals that it can accomplish for you. And we talked through this, and I thought this was just really fun to talk to somebody who has spent their whole life in a two-dimensional world, talking about how cool it is to be able to add shadow to something, to add depth. And he showed me how he did that with the mosaic tile, which is just phenomenal. How would you do that with mosaic tile? And but my point is this: you can get incredibly creative. I'm going to do this one more time, and we'll make this thing completely jump off the beach. All right, move that up so it's right in line. And on this one, I'm going to make that shadow go that way. Now that has lifted way up off of the beach, of the distance of the shadow. This is very easy to do. Steve is talking about using the duplicate. Just remember that this is something that we've always had available to us. It's just it's a very simple thing to create a 3D look from this. This is like that church floating off of the beach. Now, watch what happens if I play with this, all right? Now, I can reduce the distance a little bit, and you can see how it makes this shirt look like this light is at a very high perspective, but it's still coming from this direction, right? That's why this arrow becomes so important. It helps to remind me to make sure that I get my light coming from the right directions. All right, is there any questions about that? I'm just about done. This is about as far as I can go. So this is my challenge to you. Let's find some cool ways to use shadows to illustrate perspective. And we'll and drop those in the group, because I would love to see what you come up with, because this is this is just the tip of the iceberg. I want you, and I've done this with very simple illustrations, but I want you to see this so that you can begin to develop just adding something like shadow, and what amazing thing that does to the results of your images. Okay. Oh, that's a great question, Stephen. I don't have time to address it today, but that's a great question. Stephen's saying, how do we make the shadow so it kind of trails? And you can do that. I'll show you how to do that later, okay? But Stephen, was it Stephen that asked the question, or was it David? Oh, Stephen. Okay. Think about this. I'll just give you I'll give you a quickie of this, and then I want you to play with it. All right. I can change the opacity and the distance of that shadow. Make it go this direction so you can see that. And now I start to reduce the color. Okay. And I can get a trailing effect when I do that. See there? You can play with the distance there, and you can have a lot of fun. This is a lot of fun. This is what makes the difference between a mediocre template, which is great. The templates are hugely inspiring, but a mediocre template and an amazing template. A mediocre image and an amazing looking image. Simply adding those shadows makes a huge difference. All right, folks, I'm going to have to go. This is about it for me. And I need to take care of my voice a little bit so that I don't lose it completely. All right. Thank you so much for joining me. We'll be back next week. My voice will be much stronger, and I'll be excited to share with you the things that we have for next Friday. All right. Have a great weekend. I look forward to talking.